Hello friends, it's been a while, but I've finally gotten around to watching Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and now we get a look at the figures. So here's everyone out of the package, and I gotta say, there's so many figures in this set to review, friends. Well, because it's not really a set, it's really just 4 2-packs I opened up and decided to do in one big review video. Anyways, the character designs in Batman vs. the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were done by Danny Kamanian and Andy Kuhn, and if those names sound familiar, then you probably have been reading too many credits, but Danny Kamanian did the character designs and animation on Batman the Brave and the Bold, so I guess that explains why we got the blue cape and cowl Batman in that movie. And Andy Kuhn worked on some of the IDW comics, and his artwork for the Turtles kind of looked like these guys, a little angular, a little animated, which, I mean, lends itself well to animation, obviously. Anyways, the character designs in the movie, everybody got these weird little rib lines, I want to call them. There's these little black lines that accentuate stuff, and I mean, it's on the legs too, but like, it's really noticeable at the ribs, because it makes it look like Batman's been starving himself, and on the Turtles, it's not so noticeable. I mean, it's on there, it's on their plastrons, which is what the front of the shells are called, but since these are shells, it's kind of like, well, that's just lines, and that's how it was in the animation. It kind of blends better, like, you know, how it does with the lines on the thighs and stuff, because like, oh, those are just animation lines, but on Batman, he's totally starving himself. Some of the other characters, it's a lot less noticeable. Like Batgirl, I mean, I guess she kind of has it, but it's just like integrated in her costume, and Alfred pretty much doesn't have it, and Robin's got it, but it's like so subtle, you know, nobody cares. And Batman just looks like he's starving himself, though, so that's a little weird thing on his sculpt. If we start looking at the face, however, looks pretty good. Pretty animated, pretty stern. That's definitely Batman. Everything else looks pretty spot on compared to how it was in the animation. Comes with a cloth cape. I really like how it can dangle over him so easily. Like, it's hard to get it back to sometimes. It's a really nice cape, actually, and I usually prefer rubber capes, but wow, does this thing look good. Alfred's also got a pretty angular sculpt, but I mean, that's how he looked in the cartoon. Very angular designs all around. Really odd how his like leg sort of bends in there at the knee when, you know, and then juts out at the shin. It's like, what the heck is going on with your legs? They're so pointy, Alfred, but I mean, they added some nice details. Like, look, little wrinkles in the edges of his pants where they like, you know, bunch up and stuff, and up there at the top. I mean, it's a little weird that this seam line in his shirt's not sculpted. It's just like a painted on line. But I mean, the other stuff is sculpted. The buttons are sculpted. And then his face, I love the little droll expression on his face. Is like the sleepy Alfred. It's very Stuffy Butler-esque. Pretty much same thing going on with Batgirl. Very angular sculpt, just like how she looked in the movie. Only this time, every line on there is sculpted on, and the paint that's on there is pretty clean too, but we're talking about the sculpt right now. Even these little buttons, they're sculpted in details. A tiny little button on her neck, it's sculpted and it sticks out and it's a little bumpy, and such a tiny detail they probably could have omitted it, and then that head sculpt. I like this Batgirl with the big wide eyes. Kind of looks like the Batman from back in the day, and her cape is kind of a harder rubber, unlike Batman, but it doesn't really get in the way of her, you know, kicking up there, so that's good. And then the boots, all these little lines are sculpted in details too. Her laces are sculpted, lots of good details. Only thing I can really complain about with the sculpt is these little wrist pieces on her gloves, like, I guess they're supposed to be glued in. I mean, this one's not moving anywhere, but this one's just totally loose, so I guess it like popped off in the glue. But not a big deal. Pretty good sculpt overall. But Robin's probably my favorite from the Batman group overall. I mean, he looks animated, but he also looks like he could just pass for a comic book Damian Wayne Robin. And I'm pretty sure it's Damian Wayne in the Batman vs. TMNT movie, because he calls Batman like dad at one point, or father or something. Anyways, one weird thing about the sculpt is this little hood piece is like separate and floats around. I mean, but that's so you can like replace it, I guess, and you could just have it so he doesn't even have the hood, so you could be a little bit closer to traditional Robin, but I'll put the hood back on. Pretty weird how there's like little holes for like the hood to snap onto, but nothing for it to snap onto. In fact, it looks like there was something for it to snap onto, and they like sanded it off. What the heck is going on here, DC? That's very odd. But sculpt on the head is nice. All these little latches on his costume are sculpted. The circle that the R is in is a raised sculpted detail. I mean, the R itself isn't sculpted, but the circle is. And then all these laces on his boots, they're sculpted and sticking out. Nothing I can really complain about with the sculpt. Just don't know when it doesn't plug in there. And then we get to the Turtles, which is probably the reason I bought this set. Not that the Batman figures are bad or anything, but DC really knocked it out of the park, making each turtle different and unique. And in terms of both the animation department for the movie, doing the character designs, and the collectibles department doing these figures. You'll notice every turtle has a bandana, of course, and Leonardo's rests to his right, while Raphael's rests to his left, but Donatello's splits apart and just goes in the back, while Michelangelo splits apart and comes up in the front like he's a little girl with pigtails or something, which is kind of weird. But I mean, every turtle is different, and that extends to the belts as well. Like, look at these two little straps on Leonardo's belts. Like, at first you're just like, well, Leo's just got some blue straps, no big deal. But that's supposed to form an L, quote unquote. I mean, it's kind of loose. It's not really like an L, but then like you look at Michelangelo, and that's definitely an M right there. Donatello has a latch, which is clearly a D, and then Raphael has two little straps, which look like one big strap, because there should be like a painted line in between here separating them, but we're a sculpted line. I mean, this is a very subtle sculpted line, but whatever, that's totally an R, and by the time you look at those three, you're like, well, I guess that is an L on Leonardo. So they kind of have those 80s Turtles inspired insignias on their belts without really doing them, and then they like made each turtle like a little bit like their 2012 counterparts, and their Rise of the TMNT counterparts were like Raphael being bulky, and then Donatello having like the elongated head, which is a look I don't really like. But I mean, other than that, they kind of toned down the differences while keeping them, if that makes sense. Like, yeah, Donatello's like gangly, but he's not like super gangly, and like Raphael's bulky, but he's not super bulky to the point of being like twice as tall as everyone like in the newest cartoon. But the sculpts pretty good overall. I mean, they are angular. They look like they looked in the movie. They even got that little scar on Raphael's eye that he had in the movie. Like, it looks like it's a different material, almost like clear plastic or something. Like, I don't know what they did, but that's pretty much how it looked in the animation. So good job, DC. I like that. Their shells on the back all have pretty much the same design. I mean, their size and shape slightly differently for each turtle, but they're pretty much identical, just like the belts are pretty much identical on everyone except Raphael, who's the only turtle who gets these little wraps on his belt, which are for storing his side, which we'll look at when we get to accessory. But, I mean, he's also unique because he's the only turtle with, like, little wraps on his hands, so that's cool. He's a little differentiated. Also differentiating everybody are these elbow pads and knee pads. Leonardo has what look like roof shingles or something, or maybe it's like ancient samurai armor, how it's like plated armor or something, but those are his knee and elbow pad design. They look pretty cool. Michelangelo's are just these flat rectangles. They are kind of plain, but I mean, that's how they looked in the movie, so good on DC Collectibles for that, I guess. Donatello's, however, are rounded, and they are kind of purpley. Not quite the bright purple of his bandana, but those are definitely some purple knee pads right there. And then Raphael, being the biggest and the toughest, has these sort of Mad Max inspired like steel plates or something. They're like bolted into his knees and elbows. It's kind of tough guy Raphael there. Let's move back to Team Batman for a minute to talk about the paint, which for the most part is pretty good. No one has a wash or anything, but I mean, that helps bring out the animated look, I guess. And Batman himself has got his bat emblem very clean on there. And then all the little lines, like the mouth line and the lip line and the cleft chin line, are all lined up with their sculpted lines pretty good. I mean, I guess it's only the mouth, because why didn't they sculpt a cleft? I mean, it's just like a tiny little line there, but it's like really imperceptible. But I mean, whatever, that's how he looks in the movie, because if they sculpted a big line, he'd have a butt chin and it'd be distracting. And I'm getting off topic anyways. His white eyes are very cleanly painted on, and I don't know how hard it is to see on camera, because there's like kind of a shadow from his sculpted eyes, you know, making it difficult to see, but there's also a black outline around those eyes. Looks really, really good. All the little lines, I mean, they're kind of distracting, honestly, but that's how he looked in the movie. They're pretty clean. No problems with Batman's paint. The belt is pretty impressive. They got little black lines on most of the latches. There's a little section missing on that one, it seems like, but I mean, not a big deal. This paint is very good all around. Alfred's another story, though. I mean, his body and his shoes, like, look at those shoes. They're pretty nice, black and white, pretty clean. I mean, it's not perfect there, but I mean, this is decent enough for me. And then there's no real issues on the body. Most stuff is sculpted, and the color is supposed to be the only paint is like his little tie in these lines, and they're very straight, very clean. The red there is looking good, but then we get to his face, and it's mostly good. I mean, the weird thing is the mouth, honestly, because look at the rest of it. The eyebrows line up with their sculpted eyebrows. The eyes look pretty good, which is impressive since there's actually sclera painted on there and the eyes are half open. So, I mean, I think they did a very good job on the eyes considering. And his gray hair, pretty clean, matches up with sculpted lines, not too bad. But then we look at that mouth, and I think what's weird about it, it's not like it's off the sculpted line for the mouth. It's just that, like, his mouth comes out and droops down, and there's this big dot, and it's like, who has like a big open circle at the ends of their mouths? I don't know, but the mustache looks nice. I just wish that mouth was a bit better, because it's very distracting. Honestly, the paint's clean for the most part and done well for the most part. There's just one really distracting issue on Alfred's mouth there. Batgirl's pretty good, though. I mean, pretty much no slop. I mean, every line is like there. I mean, it's kind of weird that midline goes through her bat logo. I mean, you'd think that would be like on top of everything. I mean, I guess it makes sense if this is like a zipper and that's how she gets her costume on and off. Like, yeah, it would be broken up because you have to break it up to take costume on and off. But I mean, it's not very cool looking. I think she'd like paint the zipper yellow. I don't know, something would be get done, but paint's pretty clean for the most part. All these lines in here, painted very nicely. Even the laces. Dang, that looks good. The only real issue is her cowl. I mean, it comes over just sculpted line, just a tiny bit, that purple dangling off there, and then the eyes look a little bit fuzzy because of that printed technology, which I don't know what that would do for a character like this, but I mean, the lipstick looks so clean and glossy, and wow, there's even a black line in between the lips there. It looks really good. The hair looks good. The cape, two-tone, yellow inside, black outside. I love that look. Her paint's pretty perfect. I mean, it comes off the line there a little on the cowl, but look how impressive those little bolts and the, not bolts, but the little dots in there, the little pins and, what are they called? Buttons. They're called buttons. I feel dumb. But they look good. Now, Robin, I don't really see any paint issues on. I mean, I like the little ribbing here because it's minimal and least distracting, and that's how it was in the movie, so it's accurate. And then the R, very clean. The belt has a little black ring in it. It looks good enough, I think. I mean, there's no paint on like the seam lines in between the belt, but I mean, I don't think they really needed it. And face looks good. Those little black lines, the one in the mouth is lined up perfectly with the sculpt. Hairline looks pretty good. I mean, they even painted this part of the hood that hangs down yellow, and it's like they probably could have gotten away without doing that. So I mean, no real complaints. Everything on Robin is clean. Now for the turtles. Leonardo's belt is painted his bandana color. Michelangelo's is not painted at all. Donatello's is painted a silver color. Raphael's isn't really painted, it's outlined in black. Odd choice, but guess what? That's how they looked in the movie. So good job, DC Collectibles. Everybody gets these sort of animation lines, I guess you could call them. Leo's got them under each section of his plastron. That's the front part of the shell again, and they're pretty clean. They match up with the sculpted line pretty well. Same thing goes for the inner thigh. There's a sculpted line, and down here on both sides of the shin, they got a little sculpted line and a little black line. I don't know why there's no black line on the other side of this part of the leg, but whatever. I mean, and then under the shoulder up there, and on the back of the shoulder, not bad all around. And then in the shell, in the cracks of it, is a darker color of brown. Almost looks like a dark gray, kind of. I mean, it's coming out of the little indentation a little bit on this section, but for the most part, pretty nicely applied. And then, coolest thing Leonardo's got, all those shoulder and knee pads, they have a little paint on the inside edges to make it seem like there's a different kind of material in there, like almost like they're painted on the top, but they're not, because they're like molded in the top color, but in like real life shingles from a roof, which I think these are supposed to be, are like only painted on the top, and then the inside they're like a darker clay color or something. That's a very cool detail. Face, pretty good. I'm pretty glad they gave the little black lines above his eyes so we could tell his angry expression there. I mean, you wouldn't really be able to tell because the sculpt would just blend in and you wouldn't notice so much, so that looks great. The mouth is a frowny face because it's a stern Leonardo, and that little black line over there was in the animation, and they're all applied very cleanly. I got no issues with Leo's paint. Michelangelo, I think these shoulder pads and knee pads look pretty plain, but I mean, that's how he looked in the cartoon, so there wasn't much DC Collectibles could do. He doesn't have any black outlines on the eyes. The eyes are just big, wide, and open, and you see what a difference like those lines make for telling what the expression is. And yep, Michelangelo looks happy, and the paint's clean. And even got these little lines for his like smile wrinkles. It's so clean on there. Again, all the black lines everywhere, very cleanly applied. Also very clean on those lines inside the shell on the back. Donatello also has a similar thing going on with his eyes. There's no black lines around them, and they look like they'd be surprised eyes or something if you didn't have the mouth to give him that like pensive, thoughtful expression. And then he's got the little silvery gray paint application on this buckle and this buckle here. I mean, I guess this isn't a buckle, like a pouch or something. I don't know, but this is how he looked in the movie, and yeah, it's not perfectly clean on the D-shaped buckle down there, but it's definitely good enough, I think. And then all the black lines are pretty clean on him. Nothing too far off the mark. I said before, I noticed these little pads are like purpley, which is, nice detail, because they probably could have gotten away with just doing them gray. Like, if these had been Playmates figures, Playmates would have just made these things gray and not given us any of these lines. So the detail here is pretty top-notch so far, honestly. On the back of the shell, pretty much same as Michelangelo. Very clean all around. And then the mask is very clean. You might notice like it's a little tiny bit below that sculpted line, but honestly, it's very clean looking, very close to the line. Everyone's mask is very close to the sculpted line. It's really good job. Now, as for why Raphael's belt gets that little outline, I don't know, because it's obviously just brown. They could have gotten away without doing it. I mean, maybe Michelangelo should have had the outline. Maybe that's what I should be complaining about. But I mean, I feel like they made the decision to make everybody unique, even Raphael and Michelangelo, who just have the brown letter shape, like, they're like, well, we're going to do something. We're going to give one outline and one not. Or maybe Michelangelo's just missing his and I should be complaining about that. But the paint on Raph's wraps, pretty good. The paint on those little animation lines on his shell, pretty good. But then we come down to the thigh and that is really off the mark. And then just looking at the unpainted sculpted part, it's like, wow, you almost don't need those lines. Like, I guess they just add to the animation look, but like, I mean, it's kind of weird how like these are both like underneath the sculpted part. If I'm holding the leg this way, like that line is way underneath it, but I mean, they're supposed to be underneath it. And then over here, this one appears to be above it. If you compare it to the left leg, like that one's below the sculpted part. And then this line's above the sculpted part. So Raph is having a bunch of errors on his legs already, unfortunately. That one seems to be above the sculpted part. Thankfully, that's the same on the other leg over there, too. And then if we look at the shell parts on the back, like, it seems like there are some bits where he kind of comes out of the lines a little bit, I guess because, like, they had the most room for error. Or like some bits where he doesn't fill up the lines, like, that seems like a thin black line and compared to how thick this one is over here. It's like they had the most room for error on Raph, but I appreciate like this is a different color because it should be. And then they even got the little black lines in between. And then Raphael's face. I don't know what they did with that scar. I don't think it's paint. I think it's like a different material. But the eyes, those eyes look amazing. And they're so tiny compared to everybody else because he's got such an angry expression. His eyes are just like tiny little white slits. And they got that white paint in there so cleanly. And then the black lines above help make him look angry. I mean, yeah. The lines on the thighs are pretty far off, but I mean, everything else is pretty top-notch on Raphael. This is a very minor complaint. The paint on everybody, Batman and Turtle figure alike, has been very good. Articulation is also pretty good. There could be a few spots for improvement. All the members of the Batman family, though, they have the same articulation scheme, more or less, but Batman and Robin are exactly the same, so we will take a look at them first. They both got a ball joint head, gets good side to side, that much up, that much down, could be better. That goes double for Robin, because this is as high up as he looks, unless you start sort of popping the head off, because that's the alternate head that we'll look at later. Then they each have a diaphragm joint, not too bad side to side, and pretty decent forwards and backwards. It goes all the way around, of course. A waist joint is under that at their little belts, and they have hinged elbows that swivel around. This is as high as I can get Batman's to go, but it swivels all the way around there. Robin's also only goes up that high, about 90 degrees, but he has this little sculpted cape in the way. I don't know what your excuse is, Batman. Then they both have single hinged elbows that also swivel. I wish they were double, that'd be nicer, but whatever. And then they have wrists with ball hinges in them that they can, swivel one way, and then you could rotate the ball and get them to swivel the other way. And this is about the extent of Batman's range on his hand if you're trying to swivel it back and forth. Robin gets a bit better because of the sculpt on his wrists. Like, he just has a lot more range there. That's good. Anyways, ball joint hips go up about so far, push them any further, and they kind of swivel off to the side, or if you force it, they'll just pop off, but thankfully you can pop them right back on. And even though there's no swivel, the swivel motion that you get is pretty decent. Then you got double knees, which I love. Batman can practically kick his own butt. Don't know why you don't have the double elbows, because your elbow can't get past 90 up there, Batman. Robin's hard plastic cape does not get in the way, really. Then they each have ball joints at the ankles inserted almost horizontally into the foot, which lets them swivel around so much and can get a little bit forward and a lot bit back. That's good. Batgirl's got most of the joints that Batman and Robin did. Her head has a lot less range than Batman because of her hair being hard plastic, but it can still swivel all the way around. And her wrists get extra range just like Robin, probably because she's got the thinner sculpt on the arms there. That's good. Big difference, though, is she has a diaphragm joint and no waist, nothing at the waist. So she's basically just missing that one joint compared to Batman and Robin. And then her hard plastic cape could kind of get in the way of you squishing this further, but it doesn't seem like it's really too big a hindrance. Alfred has all those joints except one. He has no diaphragm, so it's like Alfred and Batgirl are like a perfect pair, because she gets the diaphragm but no waist, and Alfred gets some kind of waist joint but no diaphragm. Like, I mean, I guess he could kind of swivel, but like the sculpt is so tight on there, like, you can hear that, right? Ooh, you're not really getting much more than a wiggle out of this guy, and it seems like, it's sad, because it seems like there's kind of a ball joint, not just a cut in there, like, he can wiggle his pants around just a little bit. I don't know what kind of joint's in there, but it's pretty much useless at the waist. So Alfred's the weakest in terms of articulation because no diaphragm, and then whatever kind of waist joint's in there is pretty non-functional. Also, his wrists are like even less range than Batman. The wrists are pretty useless. They may as well be swivels for all I care. But he has the rest of the joints. They get pretty much the same range as Batman. Head doesn't really go up or down, but it swivels. So you can have Crazy Alfred. The turtles, thankfully, all have the exact same articulation scheme between them, even though they all clearly have like different sculpts for their bodies. I don't know how that decision worked out, but I mean, nobody gets gypped on any joint, so that's good. Not so good, though. Pretty much nobody can look up. Like, this is the highest they look up, really. I mean, I guess you could get a little higher with Raph and Donatello because they have alternate heads that are meant to pop off. But that's pretty much cheating. But they all have hinge and swivel shoulders, go up to about 90, and then swivel all the way around. That's fine. But then they have something that really annoys me, which is the single hinge elbows, and they have these elbow pads. All of them do. Same thing on Mikey there. It's not as jarring on him, but I mean, Leonardo here and Raphael, it's pretty apparent that you could have used these elbow pads to hide like a double joint, and instead, like, you bend the arm and then the elbow pad just sort of sticks out as a weird separate piece. I mean, it's just kind of frustrating when this thing doesn't line up with the sculpt when you bend the joint, and then it's like you think like, well, the joint could have been a lot better. But whatever, that's what it is. It hinges to about 90, swivels, and then as you can see, they have the same ball hinge in the wrist that the Batman figures did. It gets better range on the turtles, though, than Batman and Alfred had. About as good as Batgirl. You can swivel it and get that other kind of movement, which is great. Every turtle also has this weird diaphragm waist joint thing inside the shell. There's some kind of joint there, and, well, I mean, you can't swivel them, but you can kind of grab both hips and get this motion. The Alfred Ants in the Pants motion? That's pretty much all it's good for. I mean, you can kind of swivel the hips like this, I guess. But then the hips swivel on their own. Also, it's a very odd joint. Pretty useless, but I'm glad it's there, I guess. Anyways, ball joints at the hips. Turtles can do the splits so far. Their legs come up and they kind of get the V-quatch thing going on if you do it more, and they can also pop out, but you just pop them back on. Then everybody gets double knees. Shells kind of prevent them from kicking their own butt. Oh, I don't know where their butts are. If you're a turtle, they can kick their shell, which is nice. And then they all have ankles with the hinge on the ball, like inserted horizontally. So, pretty good articulation on the turtles. I mean, I'd like this to be a bit more functional, but it doesn't bother me. Honestly, they could have left it out and I'd still be happy. What really bothers me the most is no double elbows. Really? You have a design that works perfectly for it. Whatever. It's good enough. Good enough articulation, I say. For the packaging on these guys, as we saw earlier, every figure comes in a 2-pack. Leonardo was paired up with Batman a lot in the movie, I guess because they both wear blue, at least Batman does in this movie. So their action figures are paired up too. And Michelangelo got paired up with Alfred in the movie, I guess because Batman didn't have a team member who wore orange, but I mean, Michelangelo did spend some time annoying Alfred in the movie, so their figures are paired up. Donatello was with Batgirl, of course, because they both wear purple. And Raphael comes with Robin, of course, because they both wear red. Now, packaging for everyone's pretty much the same. They're just a window box and got a little DC logo on the side there up at the top. And on the back, you can see all the other figures in the wave. There's also a Ra's al Ghul and Shredder 2-pack, but I didn't really get that because I'm mostly interested in the turtles. Anyways, packaging's the same for everyone, so let's open them up. Oh, it's really hard to see with the figures in the wave, but it's sort of the shell pattern from like the top of the turtle van, or maybe just the turtles' backs in there on the card back. That's neat. Then each turtle and Batman character is held in with a little sock tie type thing around the waist there. And a lot of friction, because these are pretty tough to pop out. Oh, that was hard to do. Wah! Well, Robin popped out easy, in more ways than one. But he just goes back together, thankfully. And each character also has a little tray of accessories that's just held behind this other plastic tray that covers it on top, which is really nice and collector-friendly. Raphael and Robin even get an extra one that comes packaged behind the main tray. That's cool. And speaking of the accessories, the packaging for Batman and Leonardo says it has 22 pieces right there in the top corner, and 2 of those being the figures means there are 20 accessories in this thing. Batman gets a batarang, a grapple gun, an open hook, a closed hook, a bat bomb, a slice of pizza, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 hands. Leonardo comes with 1 katana, another katana, a pair of sheaths for those katana, a piece of pizza, and 1, 2, 3, 4 hands. Alfred and Michelangelo have 18 pieces, 2 of them being figures, means they have 16 accessories. Alfred comes with Michelangelo's skateboard, a slice of pizza, of course, a coffee mug, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands. Michelangelo gets one pair of nunchucks, a second pair of nunchucks, a slice of pizza, of course, 1 hand, 2 hand, 3 hand, 4 hands. And 23 minus 2, Batgirl and Donatello get 21 accessories? Batgirl has a batarang, a grapple gun, an open hook, a closed hook, a slice of pizza, a little bat cell phone, a vial of anti-ooze,
Retromutagen!
A blow dart of anti-ooze, or retromutagen, 1 hand, 2 hand, 3 hand, and 4 hands total. While Donatello comes with an alternate head, his bow staff, a TCRI canister of ooze, or mutagen if you prefer Batgirl, his turtle cum, a slice of pizza, 1 hand, a second hand, a third hand, and a 4th hand. Finally, we get to Robin and Raphael, who have 25 pieces in their box, which means they get a combined 23 accessories together. Robin comes with an alternate hooded head, a Gotham City sewer lid, his bow staff, his collapsed bow staff, a batarang, a second batarang, a grapple gun, an open hook, a closed hook, a bat bomb, a slice of pizza, an extra hand, a second extra hand, a third extra hand, and a 4th extra hand. Finally, Raphael has an alternate head, a slice of pizza, 1, 2, 3, 4 extra hands, his sai, and his other sai. Wow, that's a lot of accessories, DC. I mean, look at all this stuff! So pizza is the one thing everyone comes with, and everyone gets the same exact slice. It's pretty simple, paint looks nice, pretty plain looking on the back. And since there are 8 figures, you get 8 slices, which means you can almost make a whole pizza. I mean, you can kind of fudge it, but there's always like this little gap here. I'm surprised they don't fit together a bit better, honestly, considering how much thought DC Collectibles put into this set. Anyways, Batman and friends can all hold their slices just fine, and so can the turtles. Batman, Batgirl, and Robin each get a little batarang. It's a simple sculpt, nice and sharp on the edges there. Not much to it. Little ring of gray paint in the middle there, but pretty simple looking overall. They can all hold them fine. Robin gets 2, and when you compare all 3, you'll notice they're all actually different sizes. Batman gets the biggest one, Batgirl the medium one, and Robin has small little ones. Batman, Batgirl, and Robin each also come with this grapple gun. It has a pretty simple sculpt with some black paint apps that are applied cleanly and a little hole here for attaching the different hooks. And just like the batarang, even though they're all pretty much the same, they are different sizes. Batman has the biggest on the left, Batgirl gets the medium one, and Robin the smallest one. Everyone holds it mostly fine. You just gotta be sure to use the extra wide grip hands that they come with. Batman does also have this hand, which you'd swear would be for like the grapple gun, but I mean, I don't really see how it gets in there. It's way too big to fit in between the fingers there. It doesn't make much sense. Team Batman also gets an open hook and a closed hook to go in those grapple guns. Just like the batarang and the grapple itself, they all come in 3 different sizes and are shaped like little bats. That's cute. Anyways, not much to them. You just stick the peg in this tiny little hole in the grapple and nice and snug. That's good. Same thing goes for the closed one, although it seems to go in a bit deeper on my Batgirl's grapple gun here. And yep, nice and snug. Things look pretty cool. I like them. The last shared accessory for the Bat family, only Batman and Robin get these bat bombs, which is kind of weird. I mean, you think Batgirl would have them too. I don't know, she didn't use them in the movie, but they have a cool little sculpt. They even have details on the back, and the Batman logo is painted on pretty cleanly. You can make out the ears on the one that came with Batman on the left there. Now, Robin can kind of hold it in his grapple gun hand because his hands are so small there. But with Batman, the easiest hand is his close grip hand, because all his other hands are just way too big to hold this little thing. Now, Alfred comes with one really cool accessory, which is Michelangelo's skateboard. And yes, this is Alfred's accessory because Michelangelo actually gave it to him in the movie. And also it came packaged on Alfred's side of the packaging. But I mean, I guess you could give it to Michelangelo if you want. It fits pretty much anybody, obviously. But the disappointing thing with this, friends, is these wheels do not turn. And also pretty disappointing because there's no pegs to stick it on a figure, but the figures don't have peg holes on their feet anyway, so it doesn't make much difference there, I guess. And, you know... But these decals are nice. I'm glad they're decals and not stickers, and like what we get with skateboards that come with Playmates figures. And then this texture on here for the grip is like pretty cool, actually. Alfred can even hold it like he's gonna cherish it forever. Just like I know you're gonna do, right? Alfred also gets his cup. There's not much to it. It's just white. I mean, there's like this little bluish or blackish spray inside. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be. He can hold it in any of his hands that have a grip pretty fine, but honestly, this one makes me think like it's supposed to be for the cup, and it's like a teacup, but it's not really shaped like a teacup, so I don't know. I'm gonna call it like a coffee cup full of tea, I guess, and yep, Alfred is drinking fancy now. Batgirl came with a vial of retromutagen. Sorry, Donatello, it's packaged with her, so we're gonna call it retromutagen now. It's just yellow and gray, nothing too special about it. And this blow dart full of retromutagen. The needle on it's not sharp, but it's to be expected, although you think it could look a bit better. I mean, it's like not even painted silver, which is the color I think it would be in the feathered part on the back, because these real subtle lines sculpted in it. She can hold both of them just fine. And then Batgirl gets a smartphone, which is kind of weird when you think about it. Like, I mean, is this Barbara's phone? I mean, like, it can't be, because, like, the Batgirl logo's painted right on it to give away her secret identity. I mean, it kind of bugs me how the logo's, like, a little off-center there, but, I mean, other than that, the only paint is this big black square on it. So detail is kind of sparse, but good enough, frankly, because this is what mobile phones look like now. You can kind of fit it in her grapple hand because it has the thumb that would rest over the screen, make it look like she's pushing buttons or stuff, but I mean, the grip's just like way too loose. It actually fits a lot better in her tight grip hand right there. Robin comes with his signature bow staff weapon, and it is pretty plain. I mean, these little lines are sculpted, but there's no paint whatsoever to speak of on it. He also gets the collapsed version of the bow staff. It's pretty much just this midsection, same thing, no paint apps, just the same, but with the sides cut off. The big problem, though, is getting Robin to hold this darn thing because these tight grip hands are just way too tiny, and then these open grip hands that are real good for holding the grapple gun are just way too loose. You can see how it's like, it just falls out there. Even the right one, which is a bit better, still doesn't work so well. So your only option is pretty much the two-handed pose, which means you can't hold the collapsed stick at all, so that kind of stinks, although with two hands he does hold this okay. Robin also comes with an alternate head. The paint on it's fine. The sculpt matches the face and the art style pretty well. He looks a little bit angrier in there, I think, though. Anyways, let's pop the old head off, and then since the hood is up on this one, they made the hood that hangs down a separate piece on the main body, and we can pop the new one on. And it looks alright. It's kind of weird how there's like a gap there. I mean, it looks kind of like a girl with long hair from the back, but from the front, hood looks pretty cool. I like it. Last thing Robin comes with, which seems more like an accessory for Raphael, is this Gotham City sewer lid, and the paint on it's kind of brown, kind of clean. It is really high quality. Like, I don't know what's with the material, but it's definitely not cheap plastic. Would have made a pretty cool base for the figures, except of course no peg holes and no pegs to speak of, even though there's kind of like peg holes in here. Maybe if the figure's feet had pegs in them, I don't know, but this thing's pretty nifty. Don't know what you're going to do with it, really, other than make a character stand on it. Every member of the Bat family came packaged wearing fists. Yes, even Alfred, so he can deck criminals right in the jaw. But they also get alternate hands. Batman has these wide grip ones for his grapple gun, these tighter gripped ones, then these ones with a little gap between the digits. And I think those ones will be for holding the grapple gun, so he can have this cool little pose where his like fingers wrap around it and the hook shoots out in between them. But no, it just doesn't fit. There's no way. What they're really for is more holding the batarangs, which I mean, I gotta admit that does look kind of cool there. But if you were thinking of shoving Raphael's sai in there, it's pretty much a no-go. I mean, like, whereas this thing's huge compared to Batman's hand, so I don't see how it's gonna work. Like, you wouldn't even be able to grip that in there unless you maybe like. You could customize it, cut away some material in the gap there, but I mean, as it comes, I don't think it's really working. This is like as close as you can get, really. Next up, Alfred comes with a pair of okay hands, which I guess are for sipping tea all fancy like we did earlier with his little cup. And a pair of flat hands, I guess, for high-fiving the turtles or something. Then he has his gripping hands. The right one has a trigger finger thing going on, and the left one has two fingers out extended instead, which is odd because that's the only pair of hands in the whole set where left and right are different sculpts. And her tighter grip hands for those vials of retro mutagen. Same goes for Robin. He gets these wide grip hands that work well with the grapple gun. And these tight grip hands, which work with nothing that he comes with anyway. He didn't come with the retro mutagen like Batgirl did, and even so, those wouldn't fit in these because his hands are so much smaller. Kind of a pointless inclusion, actually. Now, something to note when you're switching the hands on these friends, because the wrists use the joint system where it's like one peg attached to another peg, these things can pop off with the hands if the ball is stuck inside there, although thankfully that doesn't happen. Most of the time, swapping the hands is pretty easy. Well, it's easy to pop them off. Popping them on can be a bit of a pain because that peg can move around while you're trying to do it, but for the most part, it works pretty well. Lots of hands, and they work pretty well. Good job, DC. Just like Team Batman, all the turtles come packaged wearing fists. Unlike Team Batman, though, they all have the same alternate hands. Every turtle gets a pair of grip hands for holding their weapons, and a pair of flatter hands for giving out high fives, I guess. The unique one being Raphael, because his flatter hands aren't quite that flat. They're kind of just even wider grip, and also he has bandages on all of his alternate hand sculpts, but otherwise, all the turtles have pretty much the same hands. The other difference, though, is Michelangelo's hands are all a bit smaller. Of course, all their hands come in their skin tone, which Michelangelo's is like a little darker and brighter shade of green than Leonardo is. It's just like their bodies. It's a very subtle difference, but Michelangelo's got smaller hands because he's a smaller turtle in the movie. Every turtle, of course, comes with their signature weapon, friends, and Leonardo gets his pair of katana. The detail on them's pretty good. I like the blue diamonds in the hilt there. They are actually sculpted in there. It's a little bit subtle. I wish the sculpt was a bit more detailed in there, but it's good. And we got gold here and on the guard, and then the blade's kind of gray. I wish it was like more silvery, but you know what? This is how it looked in the animation, so that's correct. It is ridiculously hard getting them into his grip hands, unfortunately, though. Like, the grips on him are just really tight. Either that or the hilts are just a little too big. I don't know if this is like an error or something, but oh my gosh. Oh my god, I'm gonna break these darn swords just trying to get them in his hand. Like, am I doing something wrong? These are the only grip hands he came with. Wow, it's kind of disappointing, actually. Like, it's so hard, like, I'm not even gonna try it. Like, I'm gonna break these darn swords trying to get them in these hands, I feel like. It's not like you can stretch them in either, because the hands are really hard, firm plastic. I mean, they're high quality, but I mean, if you can't have them hold as weapons, they're kind of useless in the end, aren't they? Thankfully, we got one other thing for Leonardo, which is a pair of his sheaths. Now, I was looking at Leonardo, and I'm like, okay, I'll pop these on his back, and I saw no hole, and I was going, what the heck is going on here? It's not a mistake. Leonardo only had his sheaths on the side of his belt in the movie. So, you take this plastic peg and you pop it into the rubber hole on his belt, and it can seem a little wonky at first, like, oh, that's never gonna stick, but if you work with it and push hard in there, it actually is fairly firm. It's not perfect, it's not ideal, but it's gonna stay in place all right, and then you can get the sheaths filled with swords. And look at that, Leonardo actually has a way to hold his katana without holding them. I mean, it looks pretty cool doing it, honestly. So I like the sheath accessory. I just wish his hands were a little bit more open. Next up, Michelangelo has his nunchaku. They have a real metal chain on them. They can spin around and get tangled around pretty good, and they have brown and gray paint on there. Kind of weird that Michelangelo doesn't have any orange in his weapon, even though Leonardo had blue. I mean, none of the other turtles seem to be doing the color-coded thing. Anyways, Michelangelo, unlike Leonardo, can also actually hold his nunchucks. And it's not the easiest, but you can get them in there with fairly little effort, and then they are a tight grip. He can also holster them without an extra accessory. Just pop them in the little thing on his belt here, and they are a very tight fit. They're not going anywhere in his hand or on the pouch on his belt. They're really cool. Donatello has his bow staff, of course, and another change from most adaptations. He's got two little wraps of tape around there instead of one in the middle, and I mean, I think they could be a bit grimier. They're just kind of clean looking, but I mean, this was a cartoon, so pretty appropriate, actually, and also appropriate if you think about it, he's going to hold it with two hands, that there's two tape grips instead of just one in the middle. Anyways, it's a very, very tight fit, but you actually can pop it in his hand there. I'm going to go for one right now. I mean, I'm sure you can get it in the other one, but that was a bit of work I had to do to get it like that off camera. Well, now, I think this is the holster for the bow staff, but I mean, look, the base of it's way thicker, and it's like, I mean, what are you supposed to do exactly? Wait a minute. I think getting in his hand could have been a lot easier. Oh my gosh, that's a dream come true. Leonardo's swords do not do this, by the way, I checked. Anyways, Donatello can hold his weapon really easily in the hands or on the back in his little holster there. That is a nice feature. Another nice feature, Donatello's our first turtle to come with an alternate head, which I guess is from the scene where he's like on the turtle van in the gunner seat, like shooting baseballs, I guess. I don't remember that well. I remember they shot sewer lids, but he got a baseball thing on his helmet. Well, because it's a baseball helmet, obviously, but I don't know, and the targeting reticle on his eye is kind of cool. It's painted in like this teal color. It looks really nice. And Donatello looks kind of angry in there, just like Robin did inside his hood. I also really like this head because it is a bit flatter and rounder and looks more like a traditional turtle head than his gangly looking one. So I mean, this is kind of a cool look for Donatello. I think he looks like a really mean, cool version of Donatello, and Donatello's usually the geeky one. I like this head. I also really like that he comes with this canister of TCRI ooze. And notice it's TCRI, not TGRI, like in the old movies, and painted nicely. I like the caution tape colors on the side here, although in the middle you'd think it'd be green if this were glass. Anyways, Donatello can't really hold it, like he can't really fit it in his hand. I mean, maybe if you could just stretch the fingers out a little, but again, that darn high quality plastic, friends. Finally, Donatello's last accessory is the Turtle Comm, which is totally inspired by the Turtle Communicators from the 80s cartoon, and when I got this out of the box, I was a bit disappointed. I was like, well, that's cool, looks cool. It was in the cartoon, and Donatello as a turtle used it, but I mean, it should be sculpted in an open position. Then I noticed that little hinge, and I was like, no way. No way, but yes, it opens, the keys are painted, the screen is painted. This is one cool accessory, probably my favorite one Donatello's gotten. Donatello came with a few, so that's saying something. And he can even kind of hold it if you wedge it in between his thumb and his finger there. That's so cool. Just be careful of that hinge. I do not want to break that hinge. That is such a tiny part, and this is such a delicate, cool little piece. This is an excellent accessory. Now for Raphael's signature weapons, the sai. They have a very cool sculpt there. Really pointy, actually, friends. And they got dark brown paint on the wraps there, or a little gold on the bottom of the hilt. What more can you say about them? And thankfully, you can pop them into his gripping hands easy enough. And even cooler than that, these other hands that are more open seem to be for holding the sai this way. I mean, his fingers aren't like totally wrapped around. You can kind of move the sai and get them a bit closer, and the gap doesn't quite work perfectly with the side there, but I mean, that seems to be the intention for these hands, and they look really cool doing it. But if it wasn't the intention to use the loose grip hands that way, I don't know what they're for, because it doesn't come with anything else you can hold like that, and I think they mean for you to use the tight grip hands like that because they have a little hole in between the knuckles for the side to pop through. And you can do that, but it's a little hard to get the tongue of the side and not go over his thumb, and instead like go under the thumb and around the fingers, and I'm gonna try and do that right now. Let me see. This is the closest I could get. Still, cool accessory. Also pretty cool, Raph has a unique way to store the sai. It's on the little back of his belt there. I mean, usually Raph stores them in the front of the belt or on the sides, but they are doing a lot to differentiate the turtles in this Batman vs. TMNT movie. I mean, it's kind of weird looking, honestly, but I guess it would work. You'd be able to reach them. Very cool way to store them, Raph. Last up, Raphael, of course, gets his alternate head from that scene where he was riding that motorcycle, and he looks angry in that helmet. All the alternate heads are angry. It's so funny. He's got the goggles that are painted clean, the little lines on his face painted clean, even the teeth, and I like how it's black in there. It looks really provides a good illusion of depth for him. It's a little spiky German helmet with the sculpt up there. Anyways, we can pop that off, pop that on. Ooh, it's a little tough. There we go. A nice alternate head. Good accessories, DC. Scale time, Batman stands about 7 inches or 18 centimeters tall to the tip of his ears. Alfred is also 7 inches or 18 centimeters tall. Batgirl about 6.5 inches or 16.5 centimeters. And Robin's the shortest at 5 inches or 12.5 centimeters. Leonardo's 5 3/4 inches, about 15 centimeters. Michelangelo the shortest turtle at 5 1/4 inches or 13.5 centimeters. Donatello and Raphael tied for the tallest turtle at about 6 inches or 15 centimeters tall. As always, here is everyone next to my 6-inch Batman and Spider-Man figures, so you can see how they stack up with DC Universe Classics figures or Marvel Legends. And let's get a good look at Batman in particular, because I feel he scales pretty good with most 6-inch scale superhero figures. Because if you put him next to a 7-inch scale NECA Adam West Batman, you can see that the 7-inch one's just like a teeny bit too tall, but I mean, I think that all these scales work pretty well enough, like you could fudge it, it's not a big deal. But the star of the show is, of course, the Turtles, so let's see how they compare. Here they are with the 1987 Turtles, the 2003 Turtles, 2012 Turtles, the Rise of the Turtles, the Playmates Mirage Comics Turtles, and the NECA Mirage Comics Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In case you haven't figured out that these are meant to be collector's turtles yet, the DC Comics ones scale a lot better with NECA stuff than anything Playmates ever put out, so let that speak for itself, I guess. Wow, it's been a long video, friends. We're pushing 45 minutes now at this point, so I better wrap it up with my final thoughts. Should you ultimately get the Batman vs. TMNT 2-pack sets? Well, heck yeah. I mean, you might be a little turned off by the fact that you're basically being forced to buy Batman figures to get all the turtles and stuff, but I mean, these are awesome Batman figures. Everyone, Batman character and TMNT character alike, has super accurate sculpts and paint to the way they looked in the animated film, and we get tons of accessories, and there's so many cool little details that DC's included to differentiate the Turtles from each other, and past releases of the Turtles also. Really, the only downsides are, like, Leo's swords are so hard to get into his hands. I mean, I managed to do it for this part of the review, but I had to, do a little hairdryer trick there, and I wish everyone had double elbows, but other than that, these are really terrific figures, so I recommend them wholeheartedly. Until next time, peace out, YouTube!